said something. At least I get my own space. So, that's not bad. Why'd they leave the computer on but didn't even turn on the lights? Oh. Wait a minute. Is this thing on? Huh. I guess so. I guess Chief probably just turned it on for me, I guess, or it's an automatic system, I guess. Not 100% sure. At least it's got a fan. That's nifty. And a basket of butter. I'm guessing by the ribbon, this is supposed to be a welcome gift. I don't know why. Okay. Guess I'll get to work, like Chief said. Hello, I am Detective Schmidt, and welcome to the first part of my investigations in solving the case of where Michael Afton is in the Five Nights at Freddy's series. To prove definitively that Michael Afton is in the very first Five Nights at Freddy's game, I will show all of my evidence that I have gathered at this point in time, and then break all of it down as to show how it solves this first part of my investigation. My evidence will also be split into two categories, direct and indirect. My direct evidence will be evidence that's factual and is without speculation of any kind. It's pure proof of my case. My indirect evidence is somewhat circumstantial and does require inference and reasoning to an extent, but it will, without a doubt, connect with my direct evidence, as I will show later. Now, with all of this being said, I am now going to present my true case file that I have personally made myself for my investigation into Michael Afton, which I reasonably call the Michael Index. As you can see, very much homemade myself. And we are moving on to the first pieces of evidence. Evidence 1A and 1B. The paychecks we received after nights 5 and night 6. After completing our first week and doing some overtime as a security guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, we get 2 checks, both of which are paid to the order of a person named Mike Schmidt. Now, at first, this may seem to actually be evidence against my case that Michael Afton is at the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in FNAF 1, considering the fact that the guard we play as is actually named Mike Schmidt. However, that's actually not the case. Though his name is Michael, we also do know for a fact that Michael Afton also does go by the name Mike simply as well, and we know this to be true 100% thanks to my next piece of major evidence, right here. Evidence number 2, the Handyman's Robotic and Unit Repair Module 5, aka Hand Unit. In sister location, Hand Unit actually has the label Mike taped to it right here, as we can see, and we know that's not the name of Hand Unit since we know what Hand Unit is in general, and it even tells us what it is itself.
I will be your personal guide to help you get started. I'm a Model 5 of the Handyman's Robotics and Unit Repair System, but you can call me Hand Unit.
The most reasonable person who probably taped the name Mike onto the Handy Unit device that we know Michael uses is his father, William Afton. After all, we know Michael does say that he went to the sister location rentals facility, Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals, for his father, as William asked him to put Elizabeth, Michael's sister, and William's daughter back together.
Father, it's me, Michael. I did it. I found it. It was right where you said it would be. And I found her. I put her back together, just like you asked me to. She's free now.
So, I think it's pretty clear that William probably labeled Michael's name on the Handy Unit device in order to let Michael know to take it into the facility when he went there, so that way it could help him and guide him to know what to do. But what if Michael from sister location is actually another Mike once again? I mean, Mike and Michael are very common names, not only in real life, but are used frequently across the series as a whole with characters that aren't Michael Afton, like Michael Brooks in the novels and Mike in all the versions of Into the Pit. Well, bringing Mike and Michael together as one is finalized and 100% the case thanks to my third piece of evidence, evidence number 3, the survival logbook. In the survival logbook, on page 2, the very second page of the book, we can see a person named Mike that crossed his name out and writ his name in red pen. And, lucky for us, throughout the entire rest of this book, we can see many of the things that Mike has written and drawn in red ink as well. Let's see what it might tell us about him. On page 30, the page asks you to write down a character in media that you can relate to, and Mike writes, Clara from The Immortal and the Restless, because everything about this place is crazy and no one seems to notice except me. On page 34, a page that has a circus baby with green eyes, mind you, the page asks you to write down some of your favorite therapeutic music, and Mike writes casual bongos above a picture he drew of said casual bongos. And on page 92, this page asks you to design a gift basket you would like to receive, and Mike draws 2 different types of baskets, a cash basket and a basket of exotic butters, which also seems to actually tell us that Mike didn't really want the exotic butters. Hope he got some use out of it at least. Now, I think it's very obvious that these are all callbacks to things that our player character experiences in Sister Location, our player character who goes by both Michael and Mike. This is all pure confirmation that Michael Afton from Sister Location is the same one as the Mike in the survival logbook. But overall, like I said, that's just proof of Michael Afton from Sister Location being the same Mike who writes in the survival logbook. How do the two of these things prove that Michael Afton is Mike Schmidt in FNAF 1? After all, like I said before, even though the name Mike is consistent, we do know Mike is a common name overall. Is there anything else that might strengthen the connections between Sister Location / Logbook Mike and Mike Schmidt from FNAF 1? Yes, there is. Once again, thanks to the survival logbook, as on page 6, the page has you list reasons for why you would want to actually apply to Freddy Fazbear Pizza and why it seemed like a good idea at the time. And Mike writes, employees get free pizza. It seems a bit weird for Mike to write this if he wasn't actually an employee working at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And no, this doesn't count him working at Sister Location at all, because not only is that him working at Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals, but the survival logbook itself states right here, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And not only that, it's not even something even more generic like Fazbear Entertainment, or even something fully established or affiliated with the rental service like Afton Robotics. And just to make sure that we're all on the same page, Fazbear Entertainment is the company that owns Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and has ties with anything Circus Baby related, and Afton Robotics is the company that seems to be owned by William Afton, Michael's father, and that company is the client who made the Funtime animatronics for the rental service. So Mike answering this question in a survival logbook really implies he's working at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This idea of Michael being at some Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is actually backed up by 2 other drawings in the survival logbook as well. On page 73, we see a drawing of a superhero shooting eye beams at Freddy Fazbear. Not bad and pretty damn funny. And on page 101, we see a drawing of what seems to be a security guard happily skipping away from a jail cell with Freddy Fazbear locked inside of it. Seems very likely that Mike has some hostility towards Freddy, which is understandable considering, you know, the animatronics do try to kill him. Both of these drawings actually also do include what looks like FNAF 1 Freddy, and not any other type of Freddy or Freddy design that we know of to date, like Withered Freddy, Toy Freddy, or even Funtime Freddy in Sister Location. So, it seems very likely that Michael Afton worked at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, the FNAF 1 pizzeria, as a security guard. And there you have it. Mike/Michael Afton in sister location is Mike from the survival logbook and Mike Schmidt in Five Nights at Freddy's 1. Now, while I could end the first part of my case right here, I actually decided to go above and beyond to prove not only my detective expertise, but also prove not just 100%, but 101% that Mike Schmidt is, without a doubt, Michael Afton. To do so, I will now begin using my indirect evidence, which, while not proving my case factually, will tie into my direct evidence. So to be clear, though all the evidence I have is taken from the series as a whole, this evidence from this point on is indirect evidence, which is just evidence with connections that are more looser compared to the direct evidence I talked about beforehand. So, moving on from the direct evidence to the indirect evidence, we will now be moving to evidence number 4. Fazbear Frights number 12, Felix the Shark. Now, before we go any further, yes, I am well aware that this book has overall questionable canonicity to not only any other timeline or continuity in the FNAF multiverse, but overall to the franchise as a whole, considering the fact that it is stated that the stories in this book were tales that may have ended up being on the cutting room floor while developing the Fazbear Frights series. It even says so on the back of the book itself. It says, these tales may have ended up on the cutting room floor while developing the Fazbear Frights series. But before that statement, it actually states in this 12th volume, acknowledging it still is part of Fazbear Frights, Five Nights at Freddy's creator Scott Cawthon spins 3 bonus novella-length stories from different corners of his series' canon. This tells me overall that even though the stories in this book did end up on the cutting room floor when developing the first 11 stories, Scott Cawthon, for whatever reason, decided to just publish a few of them, or I guess just maybe these 3 if they were just the only 3 that were cut, into an extra bonus 12th book overall. And since the stories did get published anyway, I feel like it's at least worth taking a look at the information that these stories do have, since Scott did have a hand in writing all of the Fazbear Fright stories to some degree. He told us that directly himself, as he stated in the second interview with the YouTuber Dawko.
Moving on to the books. How has he been working on Fazbear Frights?
It's actually really enjoyable. It's probably one of the most enjoyable things that I do because I just get to think up a really scary scenario, and then I create maybe a 10 to 15 page story out of it. And then I have writers that I work with, obviously, and they take that and they really flesh it out and fill it out and add the details and turn it into a full length story. And I get to kind of just really see it come to life. So it's been really enjoyable, and that's something that I really enjoy. It's funny because it's one of those things where as long as I know that that's something that's happening in my life, I might be at the gym or I might be watching the show, and then suddenly something will come to mind, and I'll be like, "Oh man, this is gonna make a great story," and I get right home and I start working on it.
Now then, in this 12th book, the 3rd story, titled You're the Man, features a character named Mike who's a security guard at the remains of an old Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location and knows that the animatronics are possessed. Doesn't that sound familiar? The Mike in the story is also described as a young Caucasian man in his early 20s, with his appearance being similar to that of a young college student. Here's a few descriptions of Mike throughout the story. Description 1. I'm afraid I can't. It looked like a relatively young Caucasian man, but I can't tell you much more about him. Description 2. The man, who was probably in his early 20s, held up his hands and mouthed the word, sorry. Description 3. The young man was dressed in shorts and a t-shirt and looked like a college kid. What's also a little interesting is the fact that he's described as being Caucasian, which by definition is of or relating to a group of people having European ancestry classified according to physical traits such as light skin pigmentation. Not only does You're the Band Mike have lighter skin that could match the look of sister location Mike, since, you know, we see what he looks like during the cutscenes before his body starts to rot for reasons.
I should be dead. but I'm not.
But also the fact that being of European descent would potentially match Michael being British based on his accent, as well as his father and his sister.
She can dance. She can sing.
Daddy, why won't you let me play with her?
Father, it's me, Michael.
Now, though the connection of a guard at a Freddy Fazbear Pizza named Mike would be enough of a connection on its own, I did want to focus on the details of his physical appearance in You're the Band because, like I said, not only does it seem to match relatively well with his appearance and sister location, but also goes really nicely with my fifth piece of evidence right here. Evidence number 5, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. You see, the descriptions from Mike in You're the Band match very closely to the character of Mike Schmidt from the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. In the FNAF movie, we have Mike Schmidt as the main protagonist of the movie, who works as the night shift security guard at an old Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Again, doesn't that sound familiar? Now, I'm not here saying that Mike Schmidt from the movies is Mike Schmidt from the games. Those two are clearly in their own separate universes / continuities / timelines. What I am saying though is that Scott Cawthon, since pretty much day one, has been in the development process and has been very much heavily involved with making the FNAF movies and writing the scripts. So, in some way, I think it's very likely that we can expect certain details between all of these Mikes to be the same, or at the very least, pretty darn similar. Plus, with the movies being at the very least in some way viewed as a trilogy, just like how the games were going to be viewed by Scott as a trilogy in some way, through that lens, we can actually pretty much definitively say that any potential details from Mike Schmidt in the movie is probably going to be based off of some details from Mike Schmidt in the games.
And I know that the creator of the game worked on the film. Were you able to work with him to figure out what from the lore was maybe most impactful for this version of him?
So early on, Scott, I said to Scott, what do I, there's 20 some odd games, there's books galore. What do you want me to focus on? What's essential? And he said to me, clearly, look, the first 3 games are where we're taking the movie from. That's the canon that we're really dealing with. And I think that the creative team did an incredible job translating what is the game, was great about the game into this movie.
When the casting for Mike was made, he was mentioned as being in his mid-20s to early 30s, with his character description being this. Riddled with guilt over a tragedy in his past and now struggling to take care of his younger sister on his own, Mike is low on options when he lands a new job to pay the bills, the night security guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Mike is vulnerable with a tough exterior. Though he means well, his obsession with digging for truth may have potentially disastrous consequences. If that doesn't sound at least somewhat similar to Michael Afton from the games, I don't know what does. Guilt in his past and a night security guard at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza both seem to fit pretty damn well with the description of Michael Afton. The fact that Josh Hutcherson was casted as Mike Schmidt in the FNAF movie does make sense given the appearance of Michael in Sister Location's custom night cutscenes, and the description of Mike in You're the Band, as both match his appearance relatively well. Heck, the FNAF movie novelization and script also lists Mike's age as 25, so the age matches the description from You're the Band and the casting of the movie there too. And since Josh Hutcherson would have been 30 years old when he started filming the first FNAF movie, and with that being not too much older than 25, plus him having a pretty young appearance, overall, I say everything matches up pretty damn nicely. But okay, the appearance may fit pretty damn well overall, but that's surface level stuff, literally skin deep. Even with the character descriptions, it's still a different Mike from a different continuity, so is there anything more to show that Mike Schmidt in the movie helps us prove Mike Schmidt is Michael Afton in the games? Well, quite a bit more actually. Near the start of the movie, William Afton, hiding under the identity of Steve Raglan, is a career counselor who is trying to help Mike find a new job after Mike's been recently fired from being security guard at a mall. Once again, all the Mikes seem to have a knack for getting security jobs. Isn't that pretty interesting? Anyway, continuing, when Steve Raglan seems to be looking at Mike's work history, here's what he says.
I am just trying to figure out who you are, Mr. Michael
He says the name Michael, not just Mike. Though Mike usually is shorthand for Michael, both are names in general, and like I said before, they are very common names. Mike alone could be his name, yet he says Michael right before he's about to say his last name, Schmidt. And though it probably is, I don't think this is just a reference to the games of Mike Schmidt in FNAF 1, because you think Mike would say something here like, oh, it's actually just Mike, or something similar to that. You think he would correct him if his name was just Mike and not Michael, but he never does. And the fact that Steve/William is looking at Mike's work history here, this seems to really just say that Mike's work history is not under the name Mike Schmidt, but Michael Schmidt. But once again, appearances and names. Once again, pretty surface level stuff. Is there anything more here that we can really sink our teeth into? Some really great, juicy evidence? Well, just before saying Michael's name, we get some information on Mike Schmidt's work history, which seems to indicate that he has trouble keeping down a job for long term. Yikes.
That was a mistake. It was a misunderstanding. I thought...
Just look at your employment record. Tire Zone sales associate, 2 months, terminated, insubordination. Media World, custodial staff, 1 week. It's like you're not even trying here, yet you sit before me asking for help.
Besides this scene making me, and probably some of us, feeling pretty sorry for Michael in this case, it gives us another connection actually back to FNAF 1's Mike Schmidt, which brings me to my 6th and final piece of evidence for the first part of my case. Evidence number 6, Mike Schmidt's Notice of Termination. In FNAF 1, after completing the custom night, also known as Night 7, instead of getting a paycheck like we did on Nights 5 and 6, we actually get, unfortunately, quite the opposite. We get a Notice of Termination. This means Mike Schmidt only worked as a security guard for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza for only a week, which is very similar to how Mike Schmidt in the movies was also fired from multiple jobs he didn't work at for very long. There is actually another connection here though, besides the fact that both Mike Schmidts have a hard time keeping down a job for very long. Here's the thing. One of the reasons why Mike Schmidt in the games was actually fired was general unprofessionalism. Now, what did Steve Raglan say about movie Mike's work history?
Just look at your employment record. Tire Zone sales associate, 2 months, terminated, insubordination.
Steve Raglan gave a reason for Mike being fired at one of his jobs, that being insubordination. Now, insubordination is defined as defiance of authority, or the refusal to obey orders. Which, when you think about it, is very similar reasoning to Game Mike's general unprofessionalism, meaning that both Mikes in the games and the movie seems to have a history of not being the most professional worker and well-behaved employee. Seems to me that movie Mike is very much based off of FNAF 1's Mike, who, as I've proven before, is without a doubt Michael Afton. So, there we have it. All of the most solid information and connections that I could find at this point in time to prove that once and for all, Michael Afton is Mike Schmidt in the very first Five Nights at Freddy's video game. So, with this, the first part of my investigation has been finished, and the case of Michael Afton being in the very first FNAF game has been solved. Okay, so technically, solved is a bit iffy here, since I would put this more actually in a borderline confirmed category, kind of on a theory tier list, rather than just directly confirmed. And just to be clear, I did say borderline confirmed, because technically, until Scott Cawthon says so, it's not really confirmed unless the series outright tells us this. Which I would argue that it has, but obviously it's still just a theory, technically. Though, let's be honest, this is more fact than theory at this point, because this is as confirmed as any FNAF theory can get. Right? Now, before I end this video, I do want to address the people who are watching this and might be saying, or typing even in the comments, Crashmaster, why are you making this video? I already know Mike Schmidt is Michael Afton. What's the purpose of treading old ground? Well, that is a valid question, and my response is, just because I want to help the FNAF community as a whole to answer questions that people are either confused about or are constantly trying to come up with new, weirder, or stranger answers that may not be needed, when the answer is very obvious and very simple when you just look at the evidence. Look, I know FNAF isn't exactly simple compared to many other franchises out there. FNAF is very unique in its storytelling in many ways. But I don't think that that means that all the questions are impossible to solve, and I do think that sometimes questions in the series do have a solid answer that fits well and don't need millions of interpretations or theories. And the fact is, Michael Afton being Mike Schmidt from the first FNAF game very much seems to be what the FNAF series has been trying to tell us for a very long time. And I'm pretty sure that there is actual more evidence for Michael Afton being Mike Schmidt in the first game that I probably didn't mention, because either, one, I didn't think it was strong or necessary compared to what I presented in this video, or two, it's very possible that I did actually miss something. Because, let's be honest, going through every piece of media in this entire franchise, as big as FNAF is, that's been going on for 10 plus years, over a decade, is a huge task on its own right. Okay, I'm already tired. Please, just give me a break. But overall, I just want to help the FNAF community answer questions as definitively as I can, and with all the evidence I presented here today, I believe the case can be closed on who Mike Schmidt really is. He's Michael Afton. At least in the game's continuity, just to be clear. Though, I wonder what this could mean for the FNAF movie universe / continuity. That's just gonna have to be its own topic for another day. So in the meantime, be sure to crash right into that subscribe button and leave a comment on whether or not I convinced you that Michael Afton is Mike Schmidt in the first FNAF game in this first part of my series. Oh, and don't forget to crash into the like button if you like this video, and crash into the notification bell, because I think that the next part of this series is going to be a doozy, since even though this topic was pretty much 99% on my side, I feel like, in proving my case, I think the next one might spark more discussion than this one did. And with all of that being said, I've been Detective Schmidt, and this is me signing off, finishing my first part into the investigation and case that I've dubbed the Mike Index. And with that, I will see you all later. Later, mates!